Right now, let's talk about an extraordinary story, non-COVID related at all. A computer engineer called James Howes, he's 35 years old. Well, he claims that accidentally he threw away a hard drive, which from his old laptop quite some years ago, and it's languishing in a landfill site in Newport, South Wales, and he's desperate to get it back. Why is he desperate to get it back? Well, because he says it contains a virtual currency which is worth tens of millions of pounds. And he's even promised to give a local council in Newport a quarter of the fortune if they help him dig it out of the rubbish tip. He thinks his old laptop contains Bitcoin worth some 200 plus million pounds. Well, let's talk about this with Guy Cocker, who's a tech journalist and joins us now. Good morning to you, Guy.
Morning, Julia.
This is an extraordinary story. It reminds me of my husband at least once a week when our Bitcoin has been going through the roof in recent weeks, as it periodically does. It reminds me that, I remember, selling off a load of that Bitcoin that I bought years and years ago. I have to say, there's always a sort of a pursing of the lips and a walking out of the room at that point, at the tens of thousands of pounds we've missed out on. Let's just talk about where Bitcoin is at the moment and why this could possibly be worth so much. Because obviously he didn't think it was worth anything at the time when it was thrown away back in 2013. But how much has it increased in value since then, and indeed in just the last few weeks?
Yeah, I know this isn't coronavirus related, but I still find it quite a stressful story just by how much has been lost here. So basically, James, who lives in Wales, he got in on Bitcoin quite early in 2009 when it was just a concept, really. It wasn't as well known as it is now. And he had his password locked and access to this amount of Bitcoin, 7,500 Bitcoins, which wouldn't have been worth much.
7,500?
Yeah, it wouldn't have been worth much at the time, but because of the value of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general has absolutely skyrocketed in the last, it's in the last year, but really in the last couple of months, it's kind of Bitcoin in particular has quadrupled in value. He believes it's now worth more than 200 million pounds. So he stored the passwords to access this cryptocurrency on a hard drive, which he then threw away in 2013. And he's been begging Newport Council in Wales to give him access to the landfill so that he can sort of excavate this hard drive and find it. And he's done a number of things. He's said that he'll give 25% of the fortune away to anyone who's struggling right now. So local people who are struggling because of coronavirus. He's had private equity firms said that they will donate, 10-12 million pounds to help him excavate this hard drive, because obviously they want a cut of the money as well. But the local council has said no multiple times because it's an environmental hazard to dig up all this waste. And there's obviously no guarantee that they'll find it. Even if they find it, the hard drive could have been destroyed, unsalvageable. So as I said, it's a really for anyone that sort of has lost money down the sofa and knows it's there or left it in the back of the cupboard. That's like this times 1,000. It's very difficult.
Yeah, I'm thinking how many times when you put on an old winter coat you've not worn for the whole summer, and you put your hand in the pocket and there's a fiver and you go, oh. And you're really pleased you found a fiver. Imagine losing hundreds of millions of pounds worth. I mean, that's extraordinary. He must have got in on it very early. I mean, the value. What is the value right now of one Bitcoin?
So the value right now of one Bitcoin is about $30,000. So it's incredible, and it's really, really just grown in the last month or so. And what's driving that is the fact that a lot of professional investment firms are now getting invested into Bitcoin. So that's rallying the price. People are seeing a real value in it. I think for anyone that doesn't understand, and it is a very difficult concept to explain, it's like gold, essentially. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins produced, and they get harder and harder to mine. So there are computers around the world, often in China, where access to electricity is either free or cheap, mining Bitcoins all the time, but there will only ever be a finite number available.
You know what? This is the thing where it's like Bitcoin doesn't exist in, you can't buy a coin, you can't get cash out. I mean, you can get Bitcoin online. There are actually cash points in cities where effectively you could sort of put real hard cash in, your earth pounds in, and it creates, doesn't it, Bitcoin? But it doesn't. This is the weird thing. It doesn't exist in real life in tangible terms. So when we say people are mining Bitcoin, explain how they do that.
Well, essentially, it's decentralized. So, on the one hand, you've got cash that's stored in a bank, and you can go to your bank and get it. It's a decentralized system. So, when you mine Bitcoin, there are computers all around the world that make a record of that and say you have, say, 1 Bitcoin or however many Bitcoin you've got. And when you need access to that, you need to check with the system centrally, and it will say yes, this person has this amount of Bitcoin, and it will allow. So there are certain retailers in the UK now that are accepting Bitcoin as payment, or you can transfer it into real cash if you want. And so yeah, this is it's the attraction of it is that it's completely decentralized. So there's no governments involved. It's essentially a democratization of finance, which is very attractive to certain people, and it gained notoriety in the early days because it was being used to sell illicit goods online,
Yeah.
such as drugs and weapons. But as it's become more legitimized, as the sort of the value of money has been challenged in recent times, and the real value of something like the dollar has gone down, the attraction of getting into something like Bitcoin, certainly for investors, has only increased. And certainly the price of Bitcoin, which has increased so dramatically, like I say, 4 times its value in the last year, has meant that essentially it's the most valuable asset available right now.
I mean,
Which again
there'll be
is
lots of people who will say, well, hold on a minute, I'd be crazy not to go and buy Bitcoin right now. But we've seen it go up in value, and we've seen it crash in value as well. We know that in times of economic turmoil, people turn to gold. But we know there is a specific value to that is sort of that exists in the real world, isn't it? That is a concern for a lot of people. I know that online is a real world now, but there'll be lots of people. I mean, I'm terribly risk averse when it comes to financial things. That they would say, well, but couldn't it just collapse at any time?
Yeah, and certainly that is the pattern that's happened. Every time that it's rallied and got to this stage where it's worth so much, it's then immediately fallen off and crashed. So yes, certainly history dictates that that is going to happen again. I think there's a general feeling this time that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is a concept that's here to stay and that it won't crash in the same sort of way. I will stress I'm not a financial advisor, so I wouldn't advise anyone get into this that doesn't understand it. But certainly on a personal level, I hold about £200 worth of Bitcoin. If that one day becomes worth £1,000, I'll be really happy. If I lose it, then nothing ventured, nothing gained. But it's certainly an interesting thing. If you've any interest in finance or economics to get involved in it, it's an interesting concept. Just don't forget your passwords, as has happened
Yes.
with James in Wales. And there are numerous stories doing the rounds at the moment. The New York Times reported on a programmer in the US who said similarly he forgot his password. He's got 2 more attempts to guess it. He gets locked out.
God.
If not, and he loses $240 million worth of Bitcoin. It's estimated that about £100 billion worth of Bitcoin is lost in wallets that can't be accessed. So like I said, a stressful story, and make sure you're not writing your passwords down on a piece of paper.
I've got difficult balance here. God, there's me, forgetting me log on for the Debenhams website. Good God, different worlds, Guy.